You are listening to What's Next? Conversations with Boomers. I'm Barb Desmarais, your host. So a little while back, we had an episode with Richard Ferguson, who is a realtor. We were talking about letting go of stuff. So we were talking about downsizing and how it necessitates having to get rid of a lot of stuff and how many of us have a lot of problems doing that. It's really challenging. So this is a conversation that's kind of an extension of that, but we're not talking about things. We're talking about people who in our lives who have passed on, and specifically a spouse or a partner, it may be a child. And we find it very difficult to move past it, to move on. There is no better person that I know to address this topic than our friend Denise Torgerson, who retired last July but worked in hospice for many years and has studied grief for a long time. We've talked to Denise before about different stages of grief and the myths about grief and the realities about grief. Welcome back, Denise.
Hi, thank you. Nice to be back.
This was a no-brainer to have you to come on and talk about this. So why don't you, maybe first of all, just kind of summarize what you did at hospice and how you've experienced people being able to move on from their losses?
I started at hospice. I was kind of grief support for people who are dying in their families. So in hospice house, talking to people in their beds as they were getting ready to leave and supporting the families. And then from there, started developing some of our programs. And actually, I should say before I started working at hospice, I volunteered at hospice for many years.
I know you did. I remember.
Doing grief support programs. So I created some programs. I did some teaching. I did a lot of one-on-ones. I did a lot of group support, created a group specifically for men. Specifically for caregivers. So many years, most of I did a lot of studies, and of course I still do a lot of studies around grief and trauma, but I have to say that most of the learning that I did, the most important learning I did was through the conversations I had with people who were grieving. They taught me what I know, not so much theory, but actual on the ground. This is what it looks like. This is what it feels like.
And every story is different, isn't it? Everybody's story is their own story, which is different.
Yeah. There are commonalities. There are things that might be, my friend calls it typical when talking to someone who's grieving. But I have to say that anytime I went into a conversation thinking I knew something, I was shown very quickly that I didn't, right? So everyone experiences grief differently. There's lots of things that factor into it, right? Mm-hmm. What was the relationship? How long was the relationship? How complicated was the relationship? How complex was the relationship? Financial concerns, other people in your circle. We think that we live individually, but we are so much a part of our environment and the people in our environments. And so that will affect how we grieve. And there's a point in grief where there's a decision made to move forward. It's a decision. Sometimes it's conscious, sometimes not, but there's a decision to move forward. And until that decision is made, people will sort of swim in the sadness and in the despair and the loss, rather than integrate the loss into their lives and continue on.
So how did people, from your experience, language that when they made a decision, I need to get on with life? Was there, it was just like a light bulb moment? Was there an incident? Was there, okay, enough time has passed? What were the factors that went into making that decision to move on?
Mm-hmm. Well, I'll say, first of all, that the death and who died and how they died is a big piece of this. So,
okay, that's good to know.
Yeah. So people who have experienced a traumatic loss, it's going to take them a lot longer to integrate and to assimilate all of the stuff that's showing up for them. But so, I remember being in the mall one day talking to a lady, and she said, "Yeah, my husband died." And I said, "Oh, I'm sorry to hear that." And then she said, I just got up one day and looked in the mirror and said, "Okay, you got to get on with this. You're still alive, right?" And I said, "Oh, good for you." And she said, "Yep." She said, "I joined the Red Hat ladies." I go, "Oh, good for you." And she said, "This weekend we're going to Vegas." I'm like, "Oh, wow." So the decision to move back into your life can feel uncomfortable, you know, but I thought that was a neat, this lady in the mall.
Yeah, that's a good story.
Yeah.
And of course, for a lot of people, there's guilt that goes with that. Like, how can I be here? My husband is gone or my wife has gone. How dare I go out and have fun? It's like I'm pretending it didn't happen, or I'm belittling it, or I mean, how much does that happen?
Yeah. So,
Or how often?
sure, of course it happens quite often. Of course. People, I talk to the people who are having trouble grieving, right? They showed up at hospice because they needed help. So that is a common conversation. Survivor guilt, I'm still here. And, by moving forward or, taking on a new job or moving or getting a new partner, I'm somehow diminishing or disregarding the love that I had with my person. So yeah, and that's real. That has to be acknowledged as something that feels very, very real for people. And at the same time, though, I have to be very careful how I word things because I'm mindful that people who are watching might be grieving, right? So I'm
Uh-huh.
just
Uh-huh.
mindful of how I'm saying things. Often in my conversations with people who are grieving, I would teach them the word and. Like in our brains, we're very much either or. It's either I'm this or I'm that. It's, I love my husband or I don't love my husband. And so a lot of learning around resilience and change and growth for people who are grieving is around coming to the understanding that I can love my husband and, right, my history, I can honor my history and make these changes in my life. And one does not negate the other. And that really talks to what I said earlier about integrating the loss into. So my husband hasn't died, thank God, but the people in my life that have died, very close to me, I sort of feel like I move forward with them. Like they're not
Hmm.
right. They're not. I don't try to forget them, or I try to honor them. I try to, I want my mom to be proud of me. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Uh-huh.
So it
Uh-huh.
becomes part of who I am. It's more of a present moment experience than it is my past. And so how do I bring my past into my future? And that is understanding that it's all here right now. So that word and both, those two words are really, really important to kind of start thinking about when you're grieving. No hurry, no hurry, but yeah.
Yeah, that applies to so much of life. You can, even though those two thoughts, those two notions can be in opposition, they can uh, they can be simultaneous. They can happen together, and that's okay. I mean, I know you're not a counselor, but you certainly did a lot of a lot of your conversations must have been around support and obviously helping people through this grief. So for those people that might have felt guilt, how did you what sort of things did you say to them to help them kind of embrace a new way of thinking?
Mm. Barbie, honestly, the single most effective thing I ever did in any grief conversation, whether it be in a group or one-on-one, was I listened. So often people just need the space to be able to talk about that guilt in a safe place. And as they're talking, they'll process it themselves. Sometimes though,
Hmm.
I might not challenge, well, challenge it. Hindsight's 2020, right? If only I'd, but you can't if only I'd, because you didn't know. If you knew, you woulda, kind of thing, right? So try to have those kinds of conversations with people. But yeah, guilt's the hardest. It's the hardest one. It's like if I can hold on to my guilt, I can somehow control the situation that I'm in, right? Or the next situation. Yeah. Hmm.
Yeah, divorce is very different. Divorce is also a loss. Divorce also requires a grieving process. Divorce also requires to learn to adjust and adopt a different life that you had before. The big difference is the person you divorced in most cases is still somewhat in your life, especially if you have children. Even if those children are adult children, you've got grandchildren, you've got whatever, and there's special occasions. Whereas if you've lost a partner through death, that person is never coming back. You're never going to see that person. What are the circumstances that allow somebody to move on more quickly? What's in place? What is there a certain kind of person that can move on more quickly? Do men move on more quickly than women, or is it the opposite?
I can't answer that question. That there's
Okay.
no this kind of person. But I will say that in your life, if you have people who hear you, who support you and listen to you, crucial. If you have other relationships that are willing to allow you the time to grieve and sort of nudge you back into the world, right? If you have enough oomph to be able to put yourself in uncomfortable positions, right? Like that first dinner party without your partner, that can be really hard for a lot of people, right? And very often in coupling, all of your friends are couples. So often when you lose your partner, you lose your friends too, because they don't, that single person at the table, it's very awkward for everyone, right? So there's losses that happen because of the loss. And so if you have space to be able to talk about those losses as well as the loss itself, that that will give you enough energy to be able to move forward. There's other factors, but just that whole piece of building that resilience muscle, like even when I was doing one-on-ones, grief and trauma, one of the things that shows up for a lot of people is helplessness. I can't do anything about the death. I can't do anything about how I feel right now. I can't do anything about what's happening in my world because of how I feel and the death, right? So that sense of helplessness. So even when I meet someone for the first time, my conversation is have a seat wherever you like. Like right off the bat, I'm trying to give these people choices. And as a person learns that they have choices, then they might decide to make more choices. I remember a young girl, I can't remember who died, but she was just devastated and was just blown away that she had to take time off work and was exhausted. And the last time I saw her, she looked at me and she said, because of course you're exhausted.
Mm-hmm.
Of course you're exhausted.
Mm-hmm.
Of course you need time off work. Like just the things that we are so hard on ourselves for. Anyway, she looked at me, she says, Denise, yesterday I got up out of bed and I got dressed and I went outside with the dog and then I went back inside.
Mm-hmm.
And I said, yeah. I said, that's all you could do. She said, that's all I could do. I said, good for you for honoring that. Right. So she was coming to the understanding that she was making the choices. And when you can get there, yeah, it kind of get braver. Yes.
You're such a safe person to be around, Denise. And that's what people felt, is that sense of safety, that they were going to be accepted regardless of what they were going through, what they said, that they were going to be fine with you.
I hope so.
And we'll be right back. When you mentioned the first dinner party, I mean, I remember, I don't know how many, it was a few weeks that had passed, and a couple friends of mine asked me to join them to go for dinner. And I remember walking to their car and thinking, I feel like I don't have my right arm with me here. I feel like there's something missing. It was the weirdest feeling. And Serge and I used to go to Costco together all the time. And the first time I went into Costco by myself, this feels weird. This just doesn't feel right. And then, of course, gradually you adopt a new normal. And now I feel like I'm going through it again because I was dating for a few years and have decided I don't want to do that anymore. And so I'm sort of having to come to terms with this status again. Although it's different, of course, because my husband's been gone now for 8 years, but it's kind of coming to terms with I am alone.
Mm-hmm.
So we were also talking about because we do know somebody mutually whose husband died probably 20 years ago.
A long time ago, yeah.
Yeah. And
Mm-hmm.
she has definitely moved on. She has a very full and fun and rich life. But in terms of finding another partner, that is off her radar completely and always has been.
Yeah.
So there are people like that, and that's okay. They had such a deep love for each other. I'll never find that again, and I'm not even going to try.
Yeah. And I think, I just saw her in the grocery store the other day, and she quite honestly sparkles. Where our society, our culture is very much a partnership culture. And so when we see someone without a partner, it's like, ooh,
Poor
what's
thing.
wrong with it?
Yeah,
Right? But
yeah.
yeah, poor thing. Yeah, yeah. But she's vibrant. Yeah, and they really did have a beautiful love affair. Not to say that other people who choose to be with other partners don't, but yeah, I understand her choice. I also understand the choice to try to date. I mean, I know other people who had beautiful relationships, and so they want another beautiful relationship, right? So yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah. What I had was really nice, and I'd like to try and find somebody who I can again share my life with. And yeah, we all do this differently. Do you find that, I mean, certainly in the dating world, I met men whose wives like were only gone like a year or less, and they were out
Mm-hmm.
looking for another partner. Whereas women
Mm-hmm.
take a long time to go back
Yeah.
into dating, or as the person that we were just talking about, don't at all.
Mm-hmm.
But men do seem to want to repartner more quickly. Have you found that in your conversations?
Yeah, that seems to be common, or at least it's not surprising when that shows up in the conversation, right?
Uh-huh.
Women, often women will say, I'm still married, like that feeling of being married, how they identify takes a long time for that to unravel. And men, again, like we just said, they want to experience that relational peace with someone else because that's how men, I- you know, they do better with somebody beside them.
I was just going to say that. I think we as women are better on our own than men are on their own.
Yeah, sometimes, yeah.
Sometimes, yeah, I've made a general statement, but I think statistically that is true as well.
Just even, back in primitive times, the women gathered. I mean, just it's in our DNA. The women gathered, they cooked, they made the clothes, they did the beating. They were always together. The men hunted. They went out as a tribe, but then they spread out, they split up. Men, it is in their DNA to be alone and then to come back to so go out, but then that coming back to that somewhat is very much a part of how men are able to express, right? Yeah, I don't know that men learned how to have touchy-feely conversations with other men. It's changing, but
Doesn't happen too often.
particularly, yeah, in the boomer generation, it didn't happen. Yeah, so
No.
relying on women to have those conversations around things like meaning and feeling and yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, it is kind of programmed into men, as you say. Come home to a woman who's
Mm.
in the traditional sense, who's going to cook dinner for me, and is somebody that is going to be, for many men, their wives are their best friends. That's
Yeah.
their, they kind of let their friend group, they let go of
Mm.
it, and their wife is their best friend, and when they lose that, it's lonely.
Yeah. 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 And so just I'm glad you used that word because I will say because you said earlier that you're now learning how to be alone, right? And so just to say that there's a real difference between being alone and being lonely,
Huge.
right? Yeah. Yeah. And even the sense of agency around I am alone, that statement as opposed to I am lonely. Loneliness is a health hazard, actually.
Oh, yeah, it's
Yeah.
huge.
Yeah.
It's
So,
apparently more dangerous than smoking because
right.
it's
Yeah.
very stressful. Yeah, I will say
Mhm.
that I no, I do not feel lonely, but I'm very aware that I'm alone. Um,
Mhm.
there's certain things about it, honestly, that are luxurious. The choices,
Right.
they're the freedom you have, and when you're with your own company, it's peaceful. There's not any drama. You just do what you want, and there's nobody
Mm.
questioning you or challenging you or arguing.
Yeah.
I don't know. I've had to really relook at it and say, gosh, there's worse things. This is pretty nice. As I mean, I had boyfriends when, starting when I was a teenager, and
Right.
and then, till I got married and was in that relationship for 32 years, and it was kind of part of who I was to be with somebody. So
Right.
this has been a new process for me to adjust to this, to coming to terms with this status. And maybe I'll meet somebody, but at this point, I'm thinking, this is fine.
So, but the piece that is important for people to understand is that in your aloneness, it's not because you haven't let go of Serge.
Oh no, oh no, no.
You have integrated all that he was into your life and move through that grief. And not to say that the grief doesn't come back sometimes, but for the most part, it resides in the back of it's in the back of you. It doesn't define who you are, right?
No.
In your aloneness. It's yeah, yeah. So and that's the difference. A lot of people in their aloneness are alone because they are still being they still define themselves as the husband of or as the wife of. And that's a really hard identity to let go of.
I guess for some people it really is. Yeah.
Yeah.
I've
Mhm.
kind I sort of life is full of chapters. Some chapters are really long, some are really short. And that was a chapter in my life. And all that happened during those 32 years, I bring much of it with me, and it contributes so much to who I am right now. But it's over,
Mhm.
and there's nothing I can do about it. And I remember shortly after, I mean, I think it was even within the first couple of weeks, I said, to myself, which I shared with other people, my happiness is up to me, nobody else. I am in charge of my life right now. And it's up to me to make sure that I have a good life. And we'll be right back. There's people that are absolutely stuck in that grief. Can you talk a bit about that? And when I say stuck in that, I'm not saying after 6 months or even after a year, but after a long time, they simply cannot move on.
Yeah. And again, I'm not a counselor, so I hesitate how to speak of this, but I remember one man, he came to a group and he said, the reason I'm here is because I watched my grandmother after my grandfather died and she grieved him for the rest of her life. She grieved him for 20 years. He said, and I don't want to do that. I don't want to be that person. So again, there's a choice, right? He's conscious of that. He made a choice. I'll give you another story that maybe it relates, maybe not, but a woman, her husband died. And so she joined a group and did all the, did her grief work. And then 2 years later, she came into my office she was a basket case. And she's like, I don't know what's wrong with me. all of a sudden I miss him so much and I can't do anything and I'm crying all the time and my sister's mad at me. My sister says, put on your big girl panties and let's go. And I can't. And what's wrong? And
Uh,
so, sort of peel off the ceiling and then a conversation. And it turns out that her and her husband rented their home and the guy had sold it. So she had to move. So she was in the she was in the throes of this huge grief response because the place where she lived with her husband, she had to move out of it. And but it didn't, she couldn't connect that. I had to say, well, yeah, no wonder you're in such a basket case. You have to move. Right. So then when she understood that, then she was okay. But yeah, so now back to people who don't let go. It's hard to become comfortable doing new things. I don't know how else to say it. And some people just prefer they just prefer to not make those changes, not meet those challenges, you know?
have you found that there's sometimes people that kind of hang on to that
Yeah,
identity?
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, I retired a year ago. It's a year, just about and I'm still unraveling my identity as who I was at hospice, right? It's still like it takes a long time to let go
Mhm.
of that. And so, because that question, who am I now, can be really, okay, who am I now? That's kind of an exciting, coachy question. But for a lot of people, that's terrifying.
It's really terrifying. Oh yeah, I mean, I went through that myself. I'm no longer somebody's wife,
Right.
and I was for decades somebody's wife. And yeah,
Yeah. And that's part of what we teach is that you are not your role, right? You don't have to hold on to that role. Without that role, you're still who you are. I don't know how to say it. So yeah,
right, right.
a lot of people to let go of that, right? Mm-hmm.
Well, I kind of discovered parts of myself that I think that I had kind of tucked away because I was compromising a lot for my husband's personality that was very different from mine. Or I didn't do things because they weren't things that there were certain things that I did. I had my own, always had my own group of friends that were outside our marriage, but there were things that I didn't even entertain because it wasn't part of who he was and it just wouldn't fit. And you don't realize that you're kind of tucking away little bits of yourself, and then, oh, I can be my whole self now.
Right.
I can I can do those things that I didn't do before.
Mm.
I kind of owned that I think I deferred too much, and I think we women do tend to do that. To
Yeah.
defer a lot to our husbands. Well, such and such doesn't like to do that, or such and such doesn't like it when I whatever.
Right.
And then that is all shed.
Particularly our generation, I think. I think
Oh
it's,
yeah.
but our generation for sure. Yeah, we were brought up that way, right? That's
Yeah, we learned that from our own mothers.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's not about moving on. I don't want to, it's not about moving on. I remember somebody said, "Oh, I gotta just let the grief about my sister go." I said, "No, you gotta let it in." It's really about
Hmm.
integrating it and allowing that loss to become a part of who you are and allowing yourself to grieve that. And then allowing yourself to understand that you can grieve that and create a future. Like you can do both. And a lot of times people, they don't, again, it's the and in both. You can do both. And a lot of times people don't understand. If I do this, then I'm letting go of this. No, bring it with you. Bring it with you. Make it.
I think that's so important, Denise. I think that's such a nugget of wisdom, just knowing that you can do both,
Yeah. That one does not
and
hate the other. Mhm.
one does not negate the other. Yeah, yeah,
Mhm. Mhm.
yeah. It is a difficult process for a lot of people, isn't it?
So difficult. Yeah, so difficult. Yeah. Hmm. Hmm.
And I suppose, the longer there's people now, they've been married 50, sometimes 60 years, and one partner goes, and
just to say that, grief, any kind of grief, period, requires an enormous amount of energy, right?
oh, yeah.
So in terms of moving on, letting go of that person or redefining yourself after that person dies, we did a show on tolerations, right?
Yes.
So yeah, am I hanging on to this? Is it a toleration? Is it a should? Because I think I should be doing something. Or am I hanging on to this because it gives me energy? Right. And so it's sort of an intuitive but nice way to measure where you're at when you're grieving.
Yeah, I'm glad you brought that up, because I'm sure there's a lot of people that go through that. I shouldn't be doing this. I should be home grieving. I should be home wallowing in my grief, but I want to go out with my friends.
That first time you go out and have fun, yeah, you're going to feel there's going to be some guilt there. There's going to be some, you know, uh, yeah. So,
How dare I have fun? I should be home grieving.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, I think that's so important to know that the two can happen simultaneously. The two can, yeah,
And then,
one does not negate the other, as you say.
and then the other piece is that grief is best done with people. So joining a grief support group is actually a really good idea. I'm plugging, but really it is. I mean, and most grief support groups, you don't even have to talk if you don't want to, but listening to other people and understanding that, oh, okay, I'm not alone here. That
It's
makes
not just me.
Mhm. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. If you feel stuck, do that.
And I just also want to remind people that, so Denise ran grief support groups at hospice in Prince George, in the central interior of British Columbia. I did not go to a grief support group, but I started through Meetup a widows group specifically for people that, widows or widowers, for people that were in my age group and who also had been married for 30 or more years. And I found that really helpful. Oh my gosh. And I remember after the first meeting, I think there was about 7 or 8 of us, and we walked out together, and I was thinking, every one of us here, we're all walking through this door together. We've all experienced a similar thing. We have all lost our life partner. We're all in this together. And I didn't have it for very long. I think it went on for 2 or 3 months, and I made friends through it. And it was really, really helpful, because I didn't at that point know anybody in my circle who had lost their husband through death after 30 years. Just to put that out. And there are meetup groups all over the world, and you can start your own.
Mm-hmm. And I remember, Barbie, because you were doing some stuff, Facebook groups or online grief groups. And I remember you saying, that's not where I belong. I don't want to feel like that 10 years out. That's not how I want to feel. Yeah.
That it's good for you for remembering that, Denise. I forgot about that.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. And that's why you started the meetup. And so it goes back to the very beginning when we talked about choice. Like, you understood about yourself. I do not want to feel like that 10 years out. I do not want to still be feeling that level of grief. Right. And so
yeah, I think it was a Facebook group, and I couldn't relate to anything that anybody was saying. And I just thought I need to get out of here. It was so negative. It was so heavy, and too much for me. And I never felt comfortable with that.
Yeah.
So yeah, the grief, the meetup group was great, because we were all really positive and uplifting, and what do you want to do, and let's sit,
Yeah.
It was great. Yeah, and yeah, I know, the women that I met certainly have moved on, and one of them is remarried. So anyway, Denise, many, many, many thanks to you again for coming on. And as I said in the beginning, you are the expert in this field, and your experience is so valuable, and you have such a beautiful way of presenting your ideas, Denise. You really do.
No, thank you. I appreciate being invited back. I love talking about grief and having these kinds of conversations. I hope that we are helpful for someone. So thank you. I'm very honored. Yeah.
And we're honored. We're excited to now be part of the Super Aging News Network, the most authoritative online source of news, trends, and ideas on longevity and the super aging revolution. Getting older without getting old. Find the link in our show notes and be sure to sign up for their newsletter. This episode is written and created by me, Barb Desmarais, produced, edited, and engineered by Mela. Many thanks to our guest today for making it possible, and if you enjoyed it as much as we did recording it, follow us on your favorite podcast player. Also, we are now on YouTube at whatsnext.convos with boomers. Thanks for listening.